reason why, in my opinion, government was the first, and we'll call it public sector, if you will, a great starting point is because it fit, right? There's a lot of legacy code. There's a lot of, and even some of the people who wrote some of this code, aren't around anymore or are retiring. So you've got a need to do things quickly to accelerate your capabilities.
I'm Rob Keith, partner at Salesforce Ventures, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Ryan Aytay, President and COO of Code Metal, and we're pleased to have just led their Series B. Ryan, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I think you have a very interesting journey. You were at Salesforce for 19 years, and I'm sure during that time you had a flurry of opportunities to potentially join startups. Like, what in particular drew you to Code Metal, and maybe more specifically, what drew you to Peter from a founder perspective to really jump at this opportunity?
Yeah, maybe I'll just take a moment. I think Salesforce is an amazing place. Obviously, spending 19 years and having the opportunity to work on many different things. Finishing off my time there within Tableau. I think it's always hard to leave such a great place like Salesforce, but really, I think it's a couple of things with Code Metal specifically. Of course, Peter Morales, who's our CEO, co-founder, or founder, just really this draw to the ability to go learn something new. That's just my personal scenario. I would say, though, if you think about the bigger mission is really, there's a lot of things happening, obviously, in the world with AI and code generation and all the things that are going on that we read about every day, but there's not enough focus on what I'll call AI verification. And I think, when I saw Code Metal and I met Peter and some of the other people on the team, it became apparent to me that there was something greater, something more around, which actually related a little bit to Salesforce. We talk a lot about trust. And, when I think about Code Metal, we're really solving this trust gap as it relates to, generating code, translating code, trying to modernize it, which I think you can get a long way, right? You can get 80 to 90% of the way there, but that last mile, which is how do I make it verified, but through testing and formal methods and a lot of really unique things that Code Metal does, I think is really interesting to me in general. And I think it allows companies, right, or governments, like think of really all the different aspects, to take things to production. So it's not just about like going from a MVP product or some type of prototype. We can basically verify correctly and safely that you can deploy code to, let's say, a power grid or a piece of machinery like an automobile or a drone or a plane. Like, this is very important, right? This is mission critical activity, mission critical industries. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at Code Metal, it was very new, very exciting, but also very fast moving. And I see a lot of really, at the time when I first met Peter and the team, a lot of great traction, right, with government, with commercial customers. And that to me was a really great opportunity to go and learn. Now, I'm not an engineer, you probably know that, right? I aspire to be one. The good news is AI helps me, but at the end of the day, it's, comes back to AI verification. And I think that's really what our journey is right now at Code Metal.
That's awesome. It's definitely something that drew us to the company as well, and kind of the vision and mission that Peter and the customers he was working for, to your point. The customers, whether it's government or commercial, these are use cases that there is no room for failure. You need to be 100% verified that the code that you're translating is going to be working. I'm curious, as you mentioned on the commercial side, mm-hmm. as you transitioned from running a large organization at Tableau to now on the startup side, what have been the biggest lessons learned or differences you've noticed in your first few weeks now here at Code Metal?
There are many, and I'm still learning. So it would, it's a journey. But like all things in life, I think there are a lot of really great lessons and things that I learned. Even something as simple as like the V2 mom.
Yep.
Right. We have a lot of things we want to accomplish at Code Metal. We've got a lot of great employees, but we need to prioritize what's most important and what can we do first, second, third. As it relates to the customer conversations, whether it's, with, let's say, government agency or whether it's commercial customer, conversations are similar, right? Like, people have a budget, there's a need, many people are focused on AI. I think our message and our position is really around, as I said, verification. One of the stats I was looking at the other day was like, it was like 2 to 3 million lines of just one particular code, C++, exists out in the wild. Okay, so that's not great in the sense that you need to translate and modernize, not just to modernize it, but because it's not safe, right? Yep. It's not sitting in a great place. It accelerates capability for many different companies out there, like an L3 Harris or something like that. And so when I think about, what are the differences, in many ways they're similar things, which is like, there's what's our story, what's our value proposition, how do we go to market, setting up our sales team. In fact, we just did our first Salesforce-led forecast call, meaning like we're leveraging and we rolled out Salesforce, which is exciting. Some of the good things I bring along to Code Metal.
Yep.
But differences, right, is we don't have the capabilities, the bandwidth, Salesforce, a marketing machine. I'm kind of the marketer now, even though that's not my job, but I'm like building the team. So plug for any marketers that want to come over to Code Metal, not from Salesforce, of course. But so yeah, like hiring is a huge priority for us, trying to bring on world-class people. In all functions, it's really an engineering built organization, and now we're building out the operations side of it, which is my charter.
I think one of the unique things too that drew us to Code Metal is most of the organizations we're investing in, they're typically scaling on the commercial side and then thinking about adding a public sector or government sales team when they're at 100, 200 million of ARR. Code Metal is kind of the opposite. They kind of scaled, their origin story really started with the government, kind of defense use case and customers, and now starting to think about that commercial opportunity. Being in the role at Code Metal, how do you think about sequencing those both go-to-market strategies and kind of balancing the customer needs of both?
I mean, it is very mind-blowing to me, actually, and a lot of this is due to Peter and his team, prior to me showing up, of course, which is just some of the networking that they had and sort of the circles of people that they knew, but also the work that they had done sort of in a simulation environment, for various government agencies. And so I think it's all about fit at the end of the day. So like, you're out there, if I'm, starting a company from ground zero, or maybe I've been in a year or two, it's like, where is the best fit and where can I be successful with the customer? And, if I think about AI verification in a mission critical industry, that could be, something like a government agency, right? If you think about, war game simulation, or these are all critical things that need to be done right. There's no room for error, and so I think in a world where there's AI tools everywhere, how do we make sure it's delivered safely? How do we make sure that it is verified, using proprietary techniques, so that they don't have to worry about it, right? Because they can't handle risk in that same level where maybe a different type of company could handle risk and could take some of those, try every tool under the sun. So I think the reason why, in my opinion, government was the first, and we'll call it public sector, if you will, a great starting point is because it fit, right? There's a lot of legacy code. There's a lot of, and even some of the people who wrote some of this code, aren't around anymore or are retiring. So you've got a need to do things quickly to accelerate your capabilities, code portability, if you will, to bring things to the edge, meaning hardware devices like a radio or a drone or whatever it may be. So I think it's fit, but of course you do need to balance. And so I think some of these things are, if I think about where Code Metal is also going, it's around semiconductors, and we have a big vision around being open. Mm-hmm. So there are some, won't name any specific customers, but there are some providers of said chips and hardware that may have, dominant market share. There are other vendors. We want it to be open, so there's not a supply chain issue. And I think our intent is to work with all of them and to unlock what I'll call code portability to really any semiconductor, for example, or any automotive situation, right? You see like I always talk about this concept of like, if you take a recipe, right, and I write a recipe of like, make this particular pasta, okay, well, it's a precision thing that I've done, it's a recipe. But if I document it and it's verified, then it can be really cooked in any kitchen, right? That's similar to how you can look at code in this case. It's like, once it's written and it's translated in a verifiable way, it can be run on any device. So that's really some component of our mission, is how do we make it easier for customers to deploy everywhere and maintain capability, accelerate capability, lower costs, and all those other things.
Yep. And now with this Series B funding round, you all will be able to invest in these different verticals and kind of roadmap use cases for your customers. I'm curious, when you take a step back from a fundraising perspective, the Series B process, I'm sure Code Metal had the pick of the litter in terms of investors to work with. From your time in the Valley, you've worked with a lot of Silicon Valley VCs over the years. I'm curious, between you and Peter and the team, what got you excited about working with Salesforce Ventures, and where do you think the synergies really lie between Code Metal and Salesforce Ventures here?
Yeah, so first of all, Salesforce Ventures has been amazing, and it's really, selfishly for me, it's great to be connected to kind of where I came from. It feels like we're within the family. But for anyone, even if you didn't work at Salesforce before, I think just, customer connections, I'm at your event, obviously, and I get to meet people, and there's good connectivity to other customers. There's also great opportunities, like I'm trying to hire, I can ask around, and I think it's just a great network to have. The Salesforce ecosystem at large is very big, and so whether it be executives or people working in the company, but also those companies that are within the ventures portfolio, but also even beyond that, right? So the App Exchange, I have maybe a bit more knowledge about Salesforce than most, but it's a massive network. So I think that's one of the key things. So it's a growing relationship. So I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome, great to hear, and yes, great to have you at Elevate here this week. Now that you're stepping into the role as COO and president, what are kind of the big milestones and priority for you and the team this year?
So first of all, I should say thank you for the investment. It's very important. We're extremely excited. There's a lot of activity. I think we are, key milestones, we're hiring. That's probably the number one thing I would say. We are building out a world-class organization, hiring engineers. We just opened an office in San Francisco, which, Code Metal is a Boston-based company originally, so we have our Boston office. Yep. We are moving into DC, given sort of the government focus, but then building out a presence here in San Francisco. We are also kind of, what I would say, focusing on a few key areas. So I talked about automotive and semiconductor. We also, obviously have things like the heavy industry, or really defense that's non-public sector, right? So more of those like defense contractors or primes. So that's a big focus for us as we build out our industry focus, go-to-market sales individuals, and then continuing to improve the technology, right? There are, a number of different, what I'll call product lines that we offer, whether it's like a C++, to Rust, or, I won't go through the list here, but there's a lot of different products that I think are at certain levels of maturity that we can now accelerate, and I think that's very exciting. So there's a long list of other things, but I won't bore you with the details at this point.
Definitely. No, I think as you think about verification and what you all are building towards today, like how do you see the future of kind of software development and kind of Code Metal's place in that?
I think everything's being accelerated. There's no question. I get I get into a debate with a lot of people all the time around like, oh, I can do all this with AI. And I think you can do a lot. Pick your code gen platform, if we use that example. If I'm building a very simple application, whatever it may be, you can do a lot. Maybe you can do all of it, right? Maybe you can deploy to production. Great. If you're deploying to a mission critical industry, an edge device, name your device, right? And there's a lot of things that are critical. It needs a little more focus, right? And so when I think about that, maybe the question to start with is, well, why? Well, we want it to be safe. We want to make sure that it's done in a compliant way. We want it to accelerate, because it's great if you're more productive writing the code, but if you then have to have a bunch of engineers to manually review the code that you wrote with AI, you're just shifting the burden, right? So the concept of like hardware in the loop training and concolic testing and formal methods, these are all things that we put into a bucket, which I think is sort of our Code Metal assurance, if you will. And that, I think for us is a big opportunity. And some of it is automated, right? Because we're kind of like looping on a regular basis to make sure, like, are we checking every scenario? Do we know all the edge cases to make sure that things are actually going to work when deployed into production? And then we can go to a customer and say, yes, it will work. We're confident. You can, add different workloads and feel safe, especially if people's lives are at risk in a mission critical scenario. So how does that change in the future? I think it will accelerate testing, meaning AI will help to accelerate. It will help to speed that loop, right? So the hardware in the loop scenario. Will it fully replace? I don't think it will, but I think it will make it easier for us to go faster. Because at some level, even some of these deployments we talk about, they're complicated, they're technically deep. And so how do we scale to more customers, I think, is where AI can help us. It's already helping us, of course, throughout the business. As we think about like the obvious things of making our operations team more productive, our recruiting more productive. So I think all of that's great. And it's an exciting time to be working in any of these companies right now.
Definitely. When I think about across my portfolio of companies that I work with, I think Code Metal sits across an intersection of three kind of mega trends that got us excited. I think first, this kind of wave of AI code development where we're seeing Claude Code, Cursor, just companies kind of push out code
Yep.
at exponential rate. I think they said in the next 10 years, almost 95% of all code will be AI written. I think secondly, what got us really excited is this kind of wave of physical AI, and to your point of kind of all these legacy hardware systems that need to be upgraded
Yes.
for more GPU optimized hardware. And then the third one is just kind of now the dual nature of startups, both on the commercial and on the public and government sector side. We're seeing a wave of companies now trying to sell into the government, the kind of rise of defense tech and neo primes. And I think Code Metal
Yes.
sits at squarely on all three of those and is seeing massive adoption and tailwinds from it.
Yes, it's a crazy time, and I think you're spot on with that. And I was actually going to ask you, is sort of like, you mentioned some of it, but what are the other things that made you excited about Code Metal? Because you asked me the other question.
I mean, I think for us, it all comes back down to founder market fit,
Yeah.
and I think Peter was put on this earth to solve this problem. All of his kind of prior
Yes.
history, from academia to his prior experience and background, all kind of squarely sets him up to be a domain and of one expert for this category and for this space. And the team that he's assembled from yourselves and from other executives that he's brought on board is really a team that's capable of executing both on the commercial and on the government side. And so I think all of that adds up, got us really excited about leaning in here and kind of partnering with you all to lead your Series B.
Yeah, great. I agree. Couldn't agree more, actually.
Awesome. Maybe last parting thoughts. Any advice or words of wisdom for future founders that are looking to work with Salesforce Ventures and how they can, partner closely with us today?
Yeah, I think that when you are, evaluating and, let's say you're fortunate enough to have Salesforce Ventures become part of your business, I think it's much more than just the Salesforce Ventures team. It's probably the biggest takeaway. And I know that having been part of the company, which is that Ventures is a key aspect to Salesforce, but also a great opportunity for any company that's a portfolio company is to learn from other executives. I saw like David Schmeier over here. Kendall Collins is at this event. You have great events. You have great opportunities to network and learn. Obviously, the customer depth and breadth is great. Haven't made those phone calls yet, but I'm sure at some point I will. So I think it's kind of like you're joining an ecosystem, and I think that's a key value for any company and a key opportunity to take advantage of that. You may get from other venture capital firms, but I think there's just a lot of value to be had by having Salesforce as part of your business.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think you really nailed it. We really want to help our portfolio accelerate both on the customer introduction side and on the talent introduction side and help them be successful and kind of get to those next milestones of growth. So with that, Ryan, always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.